About 2 years ago, Blackmagic took the Micro Studio 4K and the Pocket Studio 4K and simply smashed them together. Well, not quite, but not far from it. What we didn't expect back then is how much this little camera not just is a studio camera, but can be used as a full-on run and gun rig. Let me explain. Also, let me mention that this video is not sponsored by anyone, and all gear was purchased by myself with my own money. I will, however, leave an ad for audio towards the end of the video, which is where I've sourced the music and sound effects used in this video. My first build out of the Micro Studio 4K G2 looked like this. It starts with the Micro Studio cage from XLCS, a NATO mount on the top. The SmallRig low profile NATO mount in the picture will not work, as it doesn't leave enough clearance for most clamps. I've replaced it with the Conda Blue one instead, which I can highly recommend as they have small inserts that prevent the NATO mount from being able to be twisted. You'll see those nearly everywhere in my builds. This is the original V1 XLCS cage. I've since ordered the new V2 magnesium cage, which is much lighter and has a wider opening for the SDI ports, as those can get hard to get to. Unfortunately, the new cage has not arrived yet. Then the AltCine expansion pack, which also comes with that little rocker on the up-down buttons. The buttons on the Micro Studio have always been a shortcoming. They are hard to press, and the up-down are especially important, as you also can manually set the aperture with them. Even if you don't get the AltCine expansion pack, that little rocker is available as a 3D print. I'll leave a link in the description. It makes all the difference in the world on the handling of the camera. On the back of the AltCine expansion pack, I have the NPF plate from SmallRig. For a while, I was running the top rig NPF plate that the Axon Power Cage 2 also uses, but it's only rated for 20 watts output, and the Micro Studio 4K G2 expects between 18 and 25 watt, so that the NPF plate, while neater, was barely enough. The SmallRig can output in excess of what the camera needs, so it's a better fit. Next, the little 3.5-inch Supreme monitor recorder felt like the perfect fit for a rig of this size. I'm not using the provided friction mount, as I prefer to use NATO mounts where I can. Nitze have an excellent selection of NATO friction mounts. Between the camera and the monitor, a Conda Blue SSD Pro Blade handle, seeing that the Micro Studio 4K G2 needs an external SSD to be able to record video, which is Ultra HD B-RAW. This is one difference from the Pocket Studio 4K. The Micro Studio doesn't have DCI, nor does it have any other resolutions than Ultra HD, and it can't record ProRes either. You do, however, have 4K output on an SDI, so you can record ProRes to, for example, a Blackmagic Video Assist 12G recorder. The Video Assist 5-inch monitor doesn't even look too massive on the Micro Studio. Here's another limitation. You have to find a way to trigger autofocus. Well, you do, but only if the lens you're using has the LFN function button, like the Olympus 12 to 50mm power zoom. A press on that button will trigger the camera to autofocus. You would have additional buttons if you have the Blackmagic Zoom demand, which the Micro Studio camera supports, but that's quite big. You could also achieve focus with the Blackmagic focus demand. For any other lenses though, you would have to focus manually. This whole setup turns the Micro Studio 4K G2 into a really usable and compact run and gun setup with 4K raw video, and something the camera also doesn't have is a headphone port. The Security monitor actually adds that to the rig. Blackmagic Video Assist would also offer that, and additionally adding the ability to record ProRes via 12G SDI. NAB 2025 came around and Blackmagic changed the game again. The Micro Studio 4K G2 was getting support for the PYXIS monitor, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's walk through the menus up to this point. If you're not interested in the original menus and want to jump straight to the new PYXIS monitor setup, I've left chapter markers in the video so that you can find that easily. The menus of the Micro Studio, much like the OSD, are only available through the HDMI port. They look the same as you'd find on any of the Hyperdecks, especially the Hyperdeck Shuttle HD. The first menu that we get is the recording menu with all the regular options. One of the differences between the Micro Studio G2 and the Pocket Cinema 4K is that the Micro Studio doesn't get ProRes, nor does it get any other resolutions than Ultra HD, so neither DCI or any lower resolutions. The second menu is the monitor menu. We do get a wide array of assist tools on all the outputs. One of the features we got in July was the ability to enable the 3D LUT for the SDI output. That had not been possible up to then. We only had the option to choose between the 3 native Gen 5 outputs up until that point. The SDI output now also has a clean feed on-off toggle. We still cannot get access to the menus nor the OSD overlays on the SDI output, but what this little toggle does instead is that it disables all the assist functions when you toggle clean feed on, and thus you don't have to toggle each feature on and off individually. The SDI output also allows us to set it to 1080p or 1080i downscaling if needed. Both level A and B are possible. The HDMI port is only capable of 1080p from the get-go. The new addition here is the USB section, which controls the output to the PYXIS monitor, and nicely enough, any generic USB-C DP alt mode touchscreen. Next up, the audio menu. This has pretty much the same options as any other Blackmagic camera. The Micro Studio 4K G2 has a 3.5mm stereo jack, so the options are limited to the internal stereo mic or the 2 channels in the stereo jack. Then the storage menu, that lets us format the media, and that's pretty much it. Next up, the setup menu. This is where it gets interesting. Also here, all the familiar options. The stabilization option is for optically stabilized lenses that don't have a physical switch. When intending to use gyro data, and yes, the Micro Studio has gyro data, this needs to be turned off. We can choose between shutter angle and shutter speed, set the frequency on which flicker free is based on. Additionally, the Micro Studio actually can be gen locked from the SDI input. Both the zoom and focus demands are supported, and before the PYXIS monitor was supported, the zoom demand was pretty much the only way to get a few configurable buttons added to the camera. Next up are the LUTs then, where you have the standard Gen 5 ones and the ability to import your custom LUTs. After that are the presets. Well, then the firmware 9.6 dropped in July and changed the camera completely. The first issue I ran into, though, is the fact that the Micro Studio only has one USB-C port, and a regular USB hub will not drive the PYXIS monitor. What is needed is a hub that has a USB-C display port alt mode output. The first one I came across was the Selore hub. It's a bit bulky, but it's not completely out of space. Unfortunately, the only place that I was able to pick this up was in the US, and seeing that I'm in Europe, I had to get it shipped to a forwarder to even get my hands on one. That's also one of the reasons why it has taken me a while to make this video. Without the hub, you can't attach both the USB-SSD and the PYXIS monitor at the same time, and without the SSD you can't record the footage, so it's sort of critical. Before anything else, I tried a generic 8-inch touchscreen with USB-C input, and voila, yes it works, touch and all, so there's a cheaper option. Links in the description of the video. If you just want to have a budget option to get access to the menus for configuration and don't really need the PYXIS monitor, this is a good viable option. In the end, I found 3 different variants of USB-C hubs with DP alt mode. The first mentioned Selore on the right has a single DP alt mode port. The Mokin, which also is sold under the Selore brand in the US, has 2 DP alt mode ports, while the leftmost Anyoyo hub is the most compact one and offers 1 DP alt mode port and 1 HDMI port. And that actually makes it real attractive. The secondary ports on the Mokin and the Anyoyo hubs are mirrored from the first one when attached to the Micro Studio camera. So in the case of the Anyoyo, that now elevates the Micro Studio to having some real serious I/O. SDI in and out in 4K, 1 HDMI out with all the overlays that the PYXIS screen has, including OSD and assist tools. That's actually how I recorded the PYXIS menus. A HDMI that can be clean at the same time, and then the USB-C port for the PYXIS monitor. The 2 DP alt mode ports on the Mokin was also something that is interesting, but I get to that later. You can see that after I strapped the Anyoyo hub in, it's a lot more compact than it was with the original Selore hub. Additionally, I've strapped a Tentacles timecode generator under the camera, and yes, much like all the other Blackmagic cameras, The Micro Studio 4K G2 can be timecode jammed via the microphone jack. With Y cables supplied from Tentacle Sync, I still retain one channel for a shotgun mic or something in the like. As we delve into the output from the pixel screen, it all looks very much the same at first, like what we had on the HDMI output beforehand. But now every element on of the screen is touch controlled. You tap on the box in the top left, and you get all the assist tools like adding a visible frame to the screen. You can tap the FPS and adjust that, next the shutter angle, then the iris. Tapping the time code will switch it from Rec 1 to Free 1 and back. Gain, white balance, and tint. And one thing that wasn't possible before, when you tap the battery logo that shows that the camera currently is externally powered, it switches to a view where it shows you the battery voltage instead. I should mention here that if you try to run the Micro Studio with the PYXIS monitor on the internal battery alone, it'll last about 15 to 20 seconds at most. Next, let's delve into the menus. Tapping on the three faders on the right top of the screen, we get a very familiar menu. Not the one we had earlier, but a menu that everybody who ever has used a modern Blackmagic camera is used to. In the record screen, as before, only one resolution is available and only B-RAW SD recording option. In the second pane, the dynamic range setting, FPS, and so on. In the third pane, time-lapse options, detail sharpening, LUT, etc. On the monitor tab, again, a very familiar user-friendly interface common with all other Blackmagic Pocket and Cinema cameras. 3 monitor options, HDMI, SDI, and USB-C. On the SDI pane, you can see that seeing the clean feed option is turned on, all the other assist tools apart from 3D LUT are grayed out. And that is because turning clean feed on disables and turns all of them off. That way you can quickly enable and disable them. Only the 3D LUT display toggle remains active. But that's all the clean feed option for the SDI output does. The OSD and menus are not available. On the USB-C option, everything the same as what's on the HDMI option. On the second pane then, the display options. The third pane gives us Zebra options, focus assist options. Fourth pane, frame guides, opacity, colors, and grids. On the fifth page, we have the settings for the resolution and for the 3G SDI output level A or level B. Both the HDMI and the USB-C port only output 1080p, while the SDI port can output 4K, 1080p, and 1080i. Switching over to the audio tab. Again, like on every other Blackmagic camera, the only thing missing on the Micro Studio is the XLR inputs. In the setup tab, we can name the camera, set the language, date, time. Second tab, measurements, flicker-free options, stabilization, and so on. Third tab covers camera ID and genlock. On the fourth tab, it gets interesting. I mentioned being able to trigger focus with the lens function button earlier. Well, in the PYXIS monitor menus, that button can now be configured. That wasn't possible in the previous menu. Page 5 lets you configure the 3 buttons on the back of the PYXIS monitor. I have mine set to focus, LUT, on and off, toggle, and record. Page 6 was a kicker. It shows the Ursa Cine viewfinder, and yes, I have confirmed that the Ursa Cine EVF works with the Micro Studio 4K G2. Where it becomes problematic is that if you connect both the PYXIS monitor and the Ursa Cine EVF and the USB-ssd using the Mokin USB Hub with the 2 display ports, you're basically exceeding the power budget of the camera. Even though I have ensured that my NPF plate exceeds the power budget that the camera can draw. So it's an either-or situation, but it does work, and there is a way around this issue while still having all the controls from the monitor. We'll get to that shortly. Page 7 has the settings for the zoom demand. Page 8 then the settings for the focus demand. That looks pretty much like every other studio camera. Page 9 has settings for display brightness, tally lights, and so on. Page 10, we have the settings for network. And yes, the camera can take a USB Ethernet dongle, but also tether off an Android or iPhone. Page 11 then holds another Easter egg, remote control. And yes, this is remote control like what was added to the PYXIS not so long ago. Unfortunately, the camera is not able to stream its video feed to the Blackmagic camera app, but you get full camera control. And that's still interesting, because if you are using the EVF, you can tether an iPhone to the USB hub and use that for camera control then. It won't draw near as much as the PYXIS monitor does, and hence works beautifully in that combination. Finally, on page 11, we have reset and calibrate options. The last two tabs hold preset slots like in any other Blackmagic camera. By adding a PYXIS monitor to the Blackmagic Micro Studio 4K G2, long names, the camera has been truly transformed into a fully capable little run-gun box-style camera, with raw recording, gyro data and all, in a super small form factor. Let me show you around my current build. I won't say the final build because it's a never-ending story. There will always be new things coming up. And on that Ursa Cine EVF, Blackmagic in their wisdom decided to use a 19mm studio rod for that one, instead of the standard 15mm rods. The mount screws straight into the end of that rod, so you can't really replace it either. So the only way I figured to make this work was to add some 15mm brackets, screw 19mm rod holders to those, and then run the 19mm rod in parallel to my 15mm rod, the one that holds the monitor and the microphone. This works well. There's an extra holder in the PYXIS monitor kit that bolts to the side of the monitor. With that bracket, it is even possible to mount the monitor in place of the EVF at the end of the 19mm rod. Could be handy to have the monitor offset sometimes instead of on top of the rod. So, nice option to have. When you power the camera on, it takes a good few seconds before the monitor comes on. That is normal. Also, if the NPF battery is too low, like on the last 10%, then there won't be enough juice to power the monitor. It really draws quite a bit of power. At that point, it's a good plan to replace the battery. I hope this helps and you've taken something away from this video. I will be linking all the components I've used in this build in the description of the video. Some of these are affiliate links and help the channel at no additional cost to you. Additionally, I like to mention that the music and audio effects in this video came from Outtro, which is an awesome site for that kind of thing. A deal for them is also available in the video description. Having said that, bye, and hopefully see you in another one.